All right. Welcome back, everybody, to the first episode of Wake Up Your Genius. So, last episode was kind of an introductory where I presented Daniel and a little bit of Vortex Healing and Merlin. So, Daniel, welcome back and thank you for meeting with me again.
Thanks for having me back. Nice to be here on this
Beautiful. So,
bright Friday morning.
yeah. In Europe, it feels like November, but let's say we're in May. So and I do feel the rain quite of calming. So it's okay. Making the
Hmm.
best of everything. So today I was thinking we might start with a short meditation practice. I do believe a lot of our listener will be Vortex healer practitioner. So I'll guide that meditation. It will take only a few minutes to bring presence, and I'll share a few words for Vortex healing practitioner, and then if anybody else doesn't know anything about Vortex, they can as well drop into presence, and yeah, we'll see how that goes. Uh, so let's start by tuning in with our body. It's always a nice way to be present. And for those who are not used to meditation, you can gently close your eyes if this feels good and what you're doing right now. Allow it. Simply close your eyes, and one of the simplest way to tuning with ourselves is simply focus on our breath. And taking a few nice deep breaths, feeling the air coming into the nose and going down the throat, reaching the chest, the diaphragm, and going maybe all the way down to the lower belly. And we might become a little bit more aware of the physical body. And following the breath in and out, we might drop the weight of our body on the floor or the chair, the sofa beneath us, and simply connect with the sensation. We could call it the aliveness within. And this meditation is not about getting rid of anything or changing anything, but it's more about noticing what is really present. So again, we might have some physical sensation. We probably have some thoughts. The brain is involved as well. And we're not going to try to block any thoughts. We're just simply noticing. And sometime when we drop into awareness, we might feel some emotional sensation. And the goal here is not to judge them or to try to understand where they come from and the story that is attached to them, but simply to be present. And for Vortex healing practitioner, dropping into the spaciousness in the body, you might feel a vibration arising and kind of sounding like the word Merlin. And for anybody else who's not familiar with Vortex healing, you might also have a vibration arising and simply connect with the mantra I am, and then dropping any expectation of an answer or of the rest of that sentence, and simply going into I am, and becoming really aware of what's come after, of the mystery arising. And taking a few more deep breaths here. Simply taking the time to arrive to the space. And then coming back to your breath, taking a little bit more conscious breath and coming back to the physical body, coming back to the smell in the room, to the sound of my voice. And on an exhale, you can gently open your eyes. Welcome back, and thank you for being with us. Beautiful. All right. So I don't know if I'm going to make it easy on you today, Daniel, but we're not going to go into too many questions. So for those who are just joining us and haven't heard about the first episode, my name is Lou Kaysen. I'm a Vortex Healing student and practitioner. I started this podcast because I have a lot of questions. And Daniel here today is one of the teacher of Vortex Healing. And from my perspective, he has really interesting point of view from his background with consciousness, spirituality, and different modalities about expanding the state of awareness and consciousness. So again, welcome back, Daniel.
Thank you, Lou. Thanks for having me.
So we're gonna go with the big question today. Why not? One of the main questions that keep coming into my mind is, what is this universe we're talking about? Where does it come from? Maybe where is it going? And what are we as human in the place of it? How can we find, and do we need to find meaning to this existence and this experience we're having? So this question, for me at least, is being grounded in some philosophy, scientific and religious knowledge of what the world brought to, and it comes from Plato and the theory of forms, that had strong influences on Christianity and what some call the Western metaphysic question. Then we have all the Hinduism and Buddhism and Taoism that would brought the reality as an illusion called Maya, but bringing the subject of consciousness as a primary form, the non-duality, and making the observer consciousness central to this reality. Then we could go into what Christianity, Judaism, and Islam is teaching us, that the universe is not random, but has been created by a God. The universe is not a mistake. And within that, we might understand from Islam, for example, then that life is a test and a field of remembrance, trying to make us return to God. Then we have the big scientific revolution with people like Isaac Newton or Albert Einstein, where we're going to start speaking about time and space, where we introducing the black hole, the expanding universe, and the Big Bang theory, uh, which is saying that the universe expanded from an ultra dense hot state about 13.8 billion years ago. And then we can start speaking about quantum physics, with people like Niels Bohr or Werner Heisenberg and Erwin Schrödinger. And from that point, reality stops behaving logically, I would say. And the question that arises from this side of science is, does consciousness affect reality? And then we have people like Kurt Gödel, which I found fascinating. Is maybe one of the most devastating ideas in the intellectual history, when he's proving that any sufficiently complex logistical system contains truth that cannot be proven, which means logic has limits, that mathematics cannot fully explain itself. And then, of course, we can have the string theory, the multiverse theory, the virtual reality theory, and so that's for me at least what I've been looking to. And I must say I'm pretty confused and where to find some grounding truth that align. I'm not a believer in any God, at least not from one God as something out there. And so every time I meditate, every time I actually even try to find a purpose, I come back to this question: where does it all go, and where is it coming from? And maybe it's a question from the I: where am I coming from, and where am I going? So I was curious to hear what you would have to say about these big questions.
Sure. I think the last sentence that you just said sort of reflects back to the nature of the question itself. Who am I? Or, it all sort of reflects back to the I am having an experience, and who is having an experience, and all of the different religions and philosophers and scientists and streams of science that you've just mentioned is a little bit like trying to make sense of, it's almost like trying to find our way back home, trying to find that point of who am I? Who is all of this? The issue is that it very often goes into this place of a place of a separate consciousness having, or a separate thing to the universe, the separate thing to the oneness of everything, is trying to find an answer to what that other thing is. And that's where it always gets a little bit, where it sort of stumbles, I guess. On one hand, it stumbles. On the other hand, it produces new art and new fun and new theories and new fun things for us to enjoy as academia, as arts, as sciences, as an expression of the one. So it's quite an interesting thing here, as this sense of being separate. What does it mean? There's still this looking to what is it? Where does it come from? There's sort of that behind the nature of the question, where the question is arising from a place that isn't what it's asking about. And yet the very truth of it is that it's not any different to what it's asking about. And as long as it experiences itself as something else, as as the questioner, let's say, as looking at where is this universe from, there is a coming and a going still. And even if it's very subtle, there's still this place of separateness. And as long as there's this place of separateness, these questions are always going to be there. What is my purpose? Why am I here? Why did the divine make all of this? Um, um, what's it made of? When is it going to end? When did it begin? All these kind of questions are coming from a place where there's an experience that actually I am not all of this, where the question is not coming from this. It's sort of looking, there's like this little gap or a distance between me and it. And some of the scientists you mentioned, or philosophers you mentioned, started to get the idea that, hold on a second, it's a little bit like being in a rat's maze, trying to work this out philosophically or through science or mathematics, where there is a limit or a constraint through my own sort of field of consciousness, where I'm just going to sort of keep bouncing up against the walls of myself. Or even if I can, and you hear this a lot in spirituality or in sort of new age stuff, I guess, if to use the word of expansion or ascension. And if I can expand and ascend, you also hear like third dimension to fifth dimension, all that stuff. If I can rise through dimensions, then I'll be closer to what, right? To the answer, to truth. And yet there's still another wall there. There's still another sort of boundary within this sort of bubble of consciousness. I sort of look at these questions or beings or consciousness as like bubbles. And if I look at Daniel as this sort of bubble of consciousness, there's the physicality of Daniel and there's the emotion and the thoughts and their subtle bodies and their sort of energetic essence and qualities and flavors to, but all of this is creating this sense of my life, my life, which already has this sense of being separate from life, as if my life is different to life itself, as if my life is its own bubble of life. And from one point of view, it is, because within that bubble that questions all of that, that even has the need to ask the question, what is all of this? And it'll keep coming up with great new questions, right? New philosophies, new great ways of asking, well, what if I ask this way? When did time begin, right? Or how many dimensions are there really, right? Because if I can even find a new dimension, maybe I'll get closer to the truth still. And yet it's just creating a new little aspect of this bubble. Um, at the same time, the nature of those questions at some point does create a ripening of just letting go of something. It's sort of maybe on one hand we just sort of get sick and tired of asking. We keep looking for new ways to find things, and we just sort of give up. What part of my own experience of dropping this identity of something that we call the core veil, within Vortex Healing, this, and then another word is basic awakening, where this core identity of I sort of drops. You know, the part of the mechanism with me is that I just gave up trying. I sort of just gave up the questions. And I was sitting with a dear friend of mine who is also a facilitator of Healing, and a teacher. And at one point, he just said, "Just give up, Daniel. Just give it all up." And it was not like, so. On one hand, there's this bubble of him within his experience and consciousness reacting to my situation. But then there's this deeper presence, and we'll come to this, why I'm saying this. There's this deeper presence that's actually speaking with this deeper presence within me. And that deeper presence within him actually isn't separate to that deeper presence within me. So it's as if there's a bubble talking to another bubble. This bubble is almost asking the question, why can't I? I'm trying to, why can't I get there? And this other person reacts through their bubble of consciousness, but there's something more fundamental between us, which is just shared. It's shared because it's not even shared within the universe. It's shared like within the time and space of the universe. It's just shared as presence, as divine presence. You did a meditation at the beginning about presence. That presence is not your presence or my presence. It's just presence. And it's something that's more fundamental to all of the science. Science couldn't never measure presence. It could measure the effects of presence. It can measure by looking at historical data, but it'll never be able to measure not that, if that makes sense to you. Um, so for me, that's those sort of questions, and we spoke. I think we spoke last time when we met about this. For me, this existential fear as a young boy about when does it all end?
Yeah, we did.
When does the universe end, and when does my life end, and what happens after? What happens after heaven? It's a little bit like that then takes on the it takes on the role or the mask of religions and spiritualities, of trying to figure out, when does it end? Why does it end? How can we either stop the end or transcend the end, or not have to suffer through the pain of what the end means?
Hmm.
So in my particular, you're asking for my answer to this or my experience. It's kind of asking those questions from a different place. It's asking those questions. Those questions can be asked because those questions are interesting questions. You know, it's not that we should not be active in life and be humans and let our beautiful human curiosity look at the universe and go, wow, what's that? What's that for? Science is amazing. Medicine is amazing to see how the body works, how ecosystems work together, how all of this incredible manifestation of the divine, not by the divine and of the divine. It is all of the divine. It's a beautiful way of the divine experiencing itself, right? So even through our curiosity, through science, through art, through medicine, through spirituality and religion, we can really become more present and take notice of. I'm just looking at this amazing tree outside of there, right? I mean, um, um, you know, it's just incredible and um, but from my perspective, those questions become very different where I actually don't really need to know the answer. Those questions lead me into a place in my heart that is, you could say, is open, um, um, where it's almost like it's the divine asking the question to itself.
All right.
And that question to itself is how the divine experiences itself as the divine. So, so those questions is a little bit like the divine recognizing itself through Lou's questions, through religious text, through spiritual rituals. It's from my point of view, the divine enjoying and experiencing itself just as that. Where it gets um, confusing or painful or suffering for us. It's when we're back in this bubble of the questioner and we tend to be sort of bouncing off the reflection of the divine. It's almost like there's a part of the divine that needs to have that sense of suffering or separation in order for it to even produce that sort of curiosity. So you could say it's also part of the same mechanism of the divine experiencing itself as all of this. It creates this sense of separation, which is indeed the miracle of miracles. Um, um, you know, you said Maya. You mentioned the word Maya of this place where the divine and Rick Weinman, who is the founder of Vortex Healing, has this beautiful analogy of Maya blinking. And in that blink, there's all of this.
Mm.
Um, um, so I don't know how well I answered that question in terms of what you're looking for, you know, what is all of this? But all of that, all of those questions for me and in the path of vortex healing creates a ripening to sort of let go of the need to know from where I think from the place of consciousness, trying to get more answers, trying to understand more about expansion or ascension or a depth of understanding, and it becomes more of a place of just surrender. It becomes a place of surrender, not surrender just like nothing to do, but a place of surrender that this is the divine experiencing itself, asking itself, and waking up again to itself,
Mm. Would you
which is
say
really
what?
what you're
Yeah.
going.
Well,
No, please.
as I was listening, it seems like you've been asking those questions in the past from this place of separation.
Yeah.
But you said at some point now that when you ask those questions, you drop into your heart. Would you agree to say that the answer you're finding is more an experience than anything that can be spoken then, but that we can, as human being today, experience the answer of the question, but it cannot be put in words?
It can be put in words because we need to communicate somehow, and it's an effective. And again, it's another part of the beauty of the divine to create language and to create words, but words carry, let's call it a transmission, or carry an essence of something deeper. When we read a book, we're reading the words, but there's something deeper that comes through within the language of the words. You could say, in between, I think last week we spoke about music and that there is a certain essence. You've got the notes of music, but the music itself is actually the silence, for me anyways, between the notes. And it's a little bit like that with language and words as well, that we can, in Vortex Healing, we have these amazing notes, these really long manuals and very in-depth manuals. And if you would look at it from the point of view of you haven't taken a Vortex Healing class, but you see all this, you would think like, wow, look at all of this language, right? There's a lot in
Yeah.
there. And but I could almost, and if I've got some notes here from a class, and I could sort of take these notes and I could read them, but I could sort of read them not trying to get a mental perspective here, but almost just tune in to the transmission within the language. And then
Mm.
come back a little bit like what you just did with this podcast or with this interview. You started with a meditation where you brought people into presence, and this lovely sense of heart and openness and awareness is there. And the language then takes on a different quality or essence. And it's the same as well with asking the questions and the answers, what the answers come through as language. Um, you know, we could have an Australian, a Belgian, a Russian, and a Malaysian person all here together, and we all have different language, and yet there is the truth right there in the same answer, in the same language. So I think it's a long way of saying yes. I think to that language. Well, language is useful. It's almost like it helps us to contain that that essence that we can connect with to contain that transmission of truth. And that transmission of truth, again, isn't about getting our consciousness to get what it wants or our intellect to resolve the answer because it thinks if it resolves the answer, everything will be okay. And I got it.
Mm.
Aha, aha moments. Aha moments aren't really yet just quite there in my experience. But that place of where that language arises from or holds or interfaces with brings us back into something else, something deeper where the divine recognizes itself as you. It recognizes itself as language, as the question. There's something a lot more true in your experience of whatever this moment is.
All right. Um, okay. But if I go back to our first interview, we were speaking about awareness at some point where you were explaining how awareness because I asked a question about time. And so we came back from awareness and then consciousness and the gap in between. Um, it seems it could also be an answer about where is this universe come from. It all comes from this place of awareness, and then from that everything would just be created, but a number of time to have different expression.
You could say that awareness is is a part of the expression of it all, but it's not necessarily it, but it's part of the quality of it.
All
And it's
right.
part of the quality to that enables the divine to know it's having an experience. Without awareness, how does it know it is
Mm,
something?
mm.
And that awareness then sort of densifies as itself as consciousness, which is what I think we spoke a little bit about last time.
Yeah,
And then we
yeah.
have manifestation. Something is manifested as all of this.
Mm-mm. All right, I think I'll leave it there for now and for today. I think that's a lot to chew on for anybody listening, and we'll go more into the practice of vortex healing itself. You mentioned, we already mentioned awareness, consciousness, the core veil. Could you explain maybe to us what is happening in a vortex healing session or a vortex healing class, and how does the system reacts, the human body reacts to a transmission?
Sure.
What is actually
Sure.
happening?
Well, if I sort of link what we just spoke about to vortex healing and what happens in class and what the overall intention of vortex healing is, you know, there's the divine experiencing itself as all of this, as let's say infinite unique expressions of itself. You, me, tree, leaves, bacteria, dog, cat, all these various expressions that manifest as something unique. It's something unique, but it all still shares that same divine presence. That same divine presence that's not separate to you and not separate to me. And yet here I am as this bubble of consciousness, my body, my physicality, my subtle energy system, my emotions, my thoughts, my sense of Daniel in life. There's Daniel, there's you, there's the universe, there's God, there's source, and all this sort of stuff that we sort of come across. And here I am sort of bringing myself into Vortex Healing class. And from the very, very first morning, there is a certain quality within class that is already connecting with that part within me that's just present. That is existing more fundamentally than this whole, experience of being a separate bubble of consciousness. I'm doing this because I'm sort of looking like a bubble, sort of bubble. I really see
You're a
it sort of
cute
like this
bubble.
big bubble of consciousness sort of walking around into class. Here I am. And from that very first moment in class, you'll be met by divine presence. And when I say by divine presence, the first thing that can happen from the perspective of this bubble is that presence is coming to meet me, that there's something else out there that I'm walking into, that there is a higher power or an ascended master. We'll talk about Merlin in a moment because it's an interesting thing to talk about. But that divine presence is actually here. It's actually here within me. And the easiest place to connect with that is in the heart, generally. Um, and if it's not, then the reasons why it wouldn't be is because there's enough sort of, let's call it trauma with that's created a necessity to block or protect the heart. So that can then create what we call a path of healing to open up that heart protection, that one can be open, soft, and safe to be vulnerable in their heart. Um,
When you say heart,
um,
just to specify, you're not speaking about the physical heart,
I'm
or
not
you
talking about
are.
the physical heart. I'm speaking about the energetic heart, in terms of, and I think we may have, maybe we spoke about, or maybe I spoke about this somewhere else about the spiritual heart. We could say that the spiritual heart is is a place of connection within that just sits in the human energetic anatomy. And the spiritual heart is that place where we can connect with that same divine presence that I shared with my friend losing the core veil, that same divine presence that you brought um, um, this podcast in through the meditation. That's something that exists beyond space and time of all of this. It's just divine presence, and yet it sits beyond space and time, and yet we can connect with it sort of here at the back of the energetic heart. It sort of sits right at the back of the chest where it sort of touches the spine, and in that place it sort of just surrenders into. where a place where language cannot really
Mm.
take hold. No language could really language could point to it, but it could never really define it. Um, and that's the root of a student's vortex healing, let's say, um, energetic evolution, or yeah, evolution, where the transmission of the class and foundation is 5 days. But from that very first morning, something happens within that spiritual heart or in the back of that heart where there becomes a permanent bridge. There becomes a permanent interface where you can always access that place beyond all of this, or that transcends all of this, um, that divine presence. Vortex healing is an interesting sort of healing modality because we we call it energy healing, but it's more than energy healing because if you look at a lot of energy healing modalities, you're bringing in a beautiful sort of frequency, beautiful vibration, quality of consciousness that does really nice things to the system, that moves conditioning, that may warm the heart or bring in a sort of a nice vibration, which is really good for transforming issues.
Mhm.
Vortex
Mhm.
healing does that, but it also does something where it can channel that from that bridge of divine presence into either myself or into others to get as deep, deep, deep into the root of someone's conditioning. And we'll talk about conditioning, I'm sure,
Yeah.
at some point soon. What is conditioning? Um, and it wakes it up. It that bridge that students develop over the class then becomes a bridge to work on themselves for these sort of like mini awakenings where energy and consciousness is channeled, pure consciousness is channeled. When I say pure consciousness, I mean consciousness that hasn't been conditioned. It has this essence of just pureness in it that will
Mhm.
just come in, wake up something that isn't so um, we'll talk about conditioning soon, but that is conditioned consciousness. And so you have all of these moments of mini awakenings through the system, through the physical system, the emotional system, the mental system. It starts to get into where the source of conditioning is. So now it sort of comes back to looking at your original question as where is the source of all of this, right? So it's almost
Yeah.
like where is the bubble of consciousness sort of begin and end? And we call that our karmic consciousness, where we're bringing our story with us from life to life to life to life. And it will get in as deep as it can to the root of that and wake it up. Um, at the same time, it's strengthening your energy system because it's all very good to do all this sort of deep awakening and healing and transformation, but the challenge can be with that is that it can create a loss of functionality or confusion because where so used to being Daniel with this certain sort of attitude and orientation to life, and I come in to do a healing and it's a very intense healing and something moves and now, that's sort of taken out of me. It can be very confusing and almost create dysfunction in my system. So as well as waking things up in the system, vortex healing works a lot on strengthening the system so that it can live and embody and function from a new place of freedom, from this new
Mhm.
place of inner freedom, where before there was this deep, deep, deep sense of sadness, grief, loss, pain, dis-ease, all this kind of stuff. Um, when vortex healing bit by bit by bit by bit has these mini awakenings. At the same time, it's also strengthening the body, strengthening the energy system so that it can hold all of that. And I guess you could say that the divine intention behind vortex healing is to wake up, to wake up from this identity, this of I am the product of my history. I am the accumulation of all of my prior experiences and reactions to my experiences. Um, Also to be able to embody that and live in the world and not have to just live in a cave or under a tree from this new sort of awakened orientation to life, but to be able to, be a father, be an employee, an employer, a teacher, a sportsman, a musician, to participate in life. Excuse me.
Mm,
And then
mm,
also to be able to give that to others as well, in form of healing. So um, an actual healing session where you would go and be a channel for Vortex for somebody else, or just to be in the world, to go to my local coffee shop and come more from a place of freedom in the morning, like, good morning, may I have a coffee? Just that, to be met by that sort of open divine presence, um, creates a change in the world too,
mm,
is part of a bigger awakening, you could say, within the world or within the universe.
mm. I was gonna, because last time we spoke as well, I was asking you, does it all end? Can we quit the game? And your answer was, yeah, we can wake up. So I was wondering
Hmm.
if you could, in one go, explain to us what exactly is waking up,
Hmm.
and I do believe we wake up from, I mean, that conditioning is related to this asleep part, I would say. But then you can
Okay,
maybe explain what conditioning is.
sure, sure. Um, so you come into a vortex healing class, you're met by divine presence on day one. Um, um, and we're coming in as this bubble of consciousness. And I'm saying this bubble of consciousness, and I'm rocking because I've lost my feet, right? This bubble. And and this bubble is experiencing itself as a bubble, as Daniel's life, as my life. Let's say this is my life. And my life, both consciously, subconsciously, unconsciously, is sort of like this accumulation of these mini bubbles. So it's like this big bubble, and it's got all of these little mini bubbles. And you could say that I experience my life as a timeline of moments and events.
Would you say that's the
And every
part of
single
a
and
self?
every single, sorry, say again.
In some modern therapy, we call it the part. So there are, you call it bubble, but all those little story, it's a part of, or yeah.
Well, if you imagine that your life is strung together by all these events and moments, and each moment comes after the next one, comes after the next one, and each moment comes with a reaction. Do I like this moment? Is this good for me? Is this bad for me? What will I get out of it? What will I lose? Do I like you in this moment? All of this stuff sort of sits there as a reaction. And then the next moment comes along and it starts again. Do I like this moment? Is this moment good for me? Who am I? Where is this going? And so on and so forth. And then it sort of accumulates as a bubble. Then that bubble will sort of keep that bubble um, um, alive, so to speak. It sort of reinforces the reactions of that bubble. And I'll start to then have this um, experience that I am the accumulation of those experiences, of those reactions, because those reactions become memories. When those memories there's enough of those memories over time, over eons, let's just say eons of experience. I'm going to assume that anyone watching this is okay enough with the concept of a soul journey or an incarnational journey, or the the idea that we take birth, death, various bodies and life forms over time and over space. Just one moment. As I said that, the door just magically opened by itself. That was
Yeah,
really
we
something.
will, yeah, we will think that most people listening to us are if not do strongly believe in reincarnation, at least respect the point of view, and are able to hear that it is a possibility. And maybe later today or in another episode we'll speak about what is the soul. And but yeah, let's keep going with
So,
conditioning for now.
so if you take that timeline past this birth, conception, and even all the way, just take it for eons back. Imagine all of these reactions and memories of reactions and memories of reactions of reactions of reactions, and the judgments and the valuations of, am I good enough? Was this okay? Will I be hurt? Will I be safe? Will my heart be broken? Will it ever love again? All these kind of things that then sit there as an accumulation. Whereas by the time I'm walking into Vortex Healing class, there's this bubble of all of that. Now, it's fair to say anyone that's, at least most people that are interested in something like Vortex, have already been going through the process of letting go of some of those bubbles. But let's just say that we haven't. Let's just say that we're still on this path where all these bubbles of I am, that reaction is who I am. That trauma, that thing that happened to me, which is unspeakable, is who I am. Except it's not who you are, because you are sitting here right now as you. It's not who you are. It's an experience that then had a reaction to the experience. The reaction to the experience was based on prior reactions to previous experiences, because, 1,000 people could all go through the same experience and will all have a different reaction. And that's all just an accumulation of all those previous experiences. And so you get into already the second day of a of your foundational vortex healing class, and and vortex, already you start to channel vortex, this pure consciousness of we'll call it Merlin's healing essence, and it already starts bridging that pure consciousness into the root of some of those bubbles. It's almost like it just sort of pops a little bubble. It's like, oh, that's not who I am. It's like there's attachment or identity sort of consciousness that just wakes up. It just sort of wakes up to itself, because at the root of all consciousness is divine presence. So it's not out there coming in. It's not even just in my heart coming out. It's at the root of all consciousness. At the root of all of this is divine presence, is awareness, is being, love, light, all those different words that you've heard, that is a quality or an essence of the divine. So each time that we channel vortex, or that we allow ourselves to be met by this divine presence, you could say that you have these little mini awakenings where these sort of little bubbles just sort of wake up to their own essence, and their own true essence is something more fundamental than its own reaction and the memory of its reaction. And so it just wakes up. So within class, so then that sort of gets sit when we think of memories, we think, okay, it's all in here. Okay, I remember stuff, I'm having visions and visuals and all that kind of stuff. But those memories are sitting all through this whole bubble of consciousness, through my physical self, through my emotional self, my psychological self, through very subtle parts of my physical self. It's a very, very complex
System.
bubble of consciousness, this
Yeah.
system this is. So a great deal of what actually gets woken up is unconscious to us. We don't even realize what's being woken up or what's being healed, because it is so deep and it is sitting there, way, 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 way deeper than it even becomes apparent to us.
Mm.
Sometimes it is quite apparent to us. Yeah, I've got issues, I've got, and so if we talk about an issue we could say is a flavor of conditioning, is a
Mm.
sort of the way that conditioning expresses itself through me. And if we come back to that whole string of moments where I am the accumulation of all of my events and my history, and I'm the accumulation of my reactions and of my valuations and judgments that all sort of just stays here as this experience of me having a separate life as an accumulation of all of that. Um, you could say that there's certain themes that start to run through those through the string of those moments. So some of those themes may be, let's say, anger.
Mm,
A theme may be abandonment. Victim is a theme. I'm just going through now typical themes that we have as humans: loneliness, neediness,
mm,
um, um, are kind of fundamental themes or issues that are expressions of that conditioning, of that conditioned consciousness, of those memories and reactions to those memories that sort of get stored as, okay, I am that. That is what defines me. And it all sort of just sits in here as a piece of Daniel having a life. Um, um, And even though we define them as what looks to be like an emotional, anger, victim, terror, sadness, loss, that stuff also sits very physically through the system. It'll create, let's say, energetic blockages. If I'm sitting in anger, it's going to create, firstly, the liver loves to hold anger as an emotion. It's just sort of how it sits in the body. Um, but it'll also create if I'm angry, I'm sort of in this place of I'm doing this. There is a sort of a block where it's going to be hard to be let in here. And so when it gets hard to be let in here, it's going to also create a certain tension in the lungs. And if it
mm,
creates a tension in the lungs, it may then pull on my shoulder, or it may do, it starts to create all these different contortions in the body. Um, and at the same time, life is so amazing that in order for us to function, there might be this sort of inner energetic contortion here based on anger that started here. Um, um, but there's a drive for me, there's a certain other drive for my system or my sense of self to be Daniel, to achieve, to be in the world, to conquer, to have purpose in life and all that, the rest of my body starts to compensate. My nervous system will kick in to go, right, don't
mm,
worry about that. We'll push that away. Um, and this part of my body may need to sort of recompensate that way because that's sort of down and contorted. So this needs to be stronger. So all of a sudden now I'm having issues here, even though that's where the 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 origin, let's say a deeper root of the issue is. And
mm,
so when we start to get into vortex healing classes, we start to look at the energy system as more subtle than just the physicality of the system. We look at the body pathways that moves energy. We look at the energetic bodies and how it holds conditioning. We look even deeper than all of that into the actual webness of the body, the webness of the web of consciousness that makes up all of this physicality, emotionality, thought forms, and so on and so forth. And rather than doing it as a lecture and as a sort of a brain exercise where students parrot learn or rope learn, this is the system, this is what you need to learn, and the hip bone's connected to the knee bone and the knee bone's connected. And rather than doing it that way, because it is so complex, the intention of Vortex is to bridge you, well, firstly, to give you a deep healing through class, but to do that so that it bridges you into the consciousness of your body itself, so that over time it gives you your own unique experience and relationship with this bubble of consciousness. And when it does that, it becomes a more effective sort of ripening for your own awakening, for your own waking up of through your conditioned self, and also I guess makes us all useful to be of use to others, where vortex may be part of your dharma. It may be a practice. Again, some people have a vortex healing practice. You may be a massage therapist that channels vortex sometimes. But even just having that sort of quality of the divine sitting within you and in interacting with the world is already in service to the world just by bridging your awareness that deep within all of this package also creates something else more than just within your own awakening or your own healing.
Yeah, definitely. And for practicing Vortex for the last 6 or 7 months now, I can definitely share that it's not only on ordering a coffee. It's not only with human that we can feel a difference, but you can actually
Mm.
even the first step for me anyway was my relationship with nature itself, with animals,
Yeah.
with babies,
Mm.
with
Yeah.
with beings, I would say, less imprint with conditioning themselves,
Mm.
because suddenly there is more resonance with the world around us. But
Mm.
it also create, at least for me, and maybe some people will relate with that, um, and sometimes anyway, an even bigger feeling of separation by being able to touch into this true essence and stillness. And still, again, that's from my experience. I wouldn't call it love and light because it's not all bright and shiny and
Yeah.
peaceful and loving.
Yeah.
But it does hold a quality of peace, of more
Mm.
peace, more. Um, and it's hard sometimes to get out of class and actually be like, there is something about w- who am I supposed to be now? Because it
Mm.
seems um, it seems a bit like performing something, being in this material world, especially the way the world is today. Can't
Yeah.
say we're living in a peaceful time. I don't know
Yeah.
if there ever
Mm.
was a peaceful time on Earth, but right now
Mm.
it's and connecting with the oneness. I finished a book from Brene Brown called Rising Strong, and she in a part of her book she's speaking about looking at everybody as they're doing the best they can. And I do believe, and
Mm.
I'm sharing with the listener viewers, it is amazing to do that with your friends and family and partners, and because it really helps to have compassion and to look at them different way. But on a broader
Mm.
picture or bigger picture, it's really hard to trust that some of the influential people in the world today are doing the best they can. And it creates
Mhm.
all the time, from a session, a healing session or a class, to going back into the world, this it's like two different universe.
Mhm. It
um
can it can it can feel like that until there is a point where it doesn't. So part of the process through healing and awakening is being more aware or conscious of what's not, what is creating suffering or what is, as you said, other.
mm,
And that's sort of part of the process, though. Um, and I guess part of that process is where we've avoided part of what creates this bubble is avoidance of what's out there. And my sense, at least, and my experience of vortex healing is that the deeper you go into it, the more that you can be with what we define as what's not good in the world and still feel safe and present and 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 alive despite all of what's out there in the world. It's just, and at some point, without getting too, um, I don't want to create a spiritual bypass, but at the very root of it, it's another expression of the divine having an experience. It's another expression of divinity. And again, that can sort of create a, oh, it's all one, it's all perfect, there's nothing for me to do, it's all beautiful. we still have this human experience and the need to do something about it, right? There's still part of the play of life to, if I see something that's wrong, to speak up, or if I see somebody suffering, well, I could say that's just the divine having an experience, or I could go and do healing for them, or just put my hand on their shoulder and say, "Are you okay?" And that's all part of the divine experiencing itself, and maybe it's a good segue for a next talk of what we talk about karma, right? External and internal karma, because that's a very big thing that we do touch on within Vortex about what does healing actually work on in terms of internal karma or karmic conditioning versus what is just the law of the universe of external karma and sort of the balancing of things where we don't really work on that, not directly anyways, because that is just the universe keep on a continual balance of itself. Um, but working through our internal karmic conditioning will certainly have a a profound acceptance of our karma.
Mm-mm. Yeah, I totally
Um,
agree. As you were talking earlier, I was thinking next episode it's gonna be about karma. So we're we're on the
there you
same.
go. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it does feels. You were gonna say something? Did I cut you?
No, 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 it's okay.
No.
I'm good.
Um. All right, we're gonna wrap up with maybe one last question. Maybe more about when you started Vortex Healing 9 years ago, I think, or no, more than that.
No,
15,
15 years ago. Yeah.
15, yeah, you started teaching 9 years. How would you describe your sensing development over the last 15 years? And because we started this conversation about Vortex Healing, what's happening in class,
Yeah.
and it seems like you have quite a big picture of the anatomy, the energetic anatomy, physical anatomy of the people you're working with in holding a field. And so I was
Mhm.
wondering if you could share a little bit about this journey for you and how it was and what it brought into your life.
It significantly developed my sensing by magnitudes that I could not have ever imagined to be possible. Um, and and I think a lot of people are watching would have may be able to relate to this, that my sensing as a young boy was extremely high,
Mm,
extremely high. Um, and up until then, at some point into just getting into teens and maybe into mid-teens, it started to sort of close up in a way. I mean, I still had some very good intuition that served me, but in terms of it, almost like it went dead for a while. It just sort of shut down, and I had to experience life in a different way. But since that first class of taking foundational, or back then it was called basic class, until we realized that um, there is no, I mean, it's not basic at all, but it is the foundation of all that we do in vortex healing. Um, um, it's significantly deepened, firstly, because working with issues, so waking up issues, healing issues, a lot of those issues is about not wanting to see, avoiding seeing what's there. Part of this whole bubble creation is actually avoidance, and it's actually repression or suppression of what appears to be the pain of life and the suffering of life. And so a part of and for me as a child, that whole suffering, as I mentioned last time, of grandmother and what happens after heaven and the end of time sort of suffering. Um, certainly, that type of stuff we tend to just sort of push away. So when that starts to wake up and gets transformed, firstly there's protective layers that are no longer there because it's safe just to be present. because actually I can't be annihilated. Whatever is eternally present within here is it will always be here, whether this body is here or not. Um, so that's one part of it. Secondly, we have actual transmissions and classes to develop sensing within Vortex Healing. Um, and thirdly, I think is that I just take notice. It can really be a sim so from that place of doing the healing, taking sort of developing sensing through transmissions and I guess um, the biggest aspect of that is just being curious and being open. And one of the big um, what's the word issues that's been worked on over the years is the issue of trust
Mm.
and trust that what I'm seeing is true, is what I need to be seeing right now. And so, 15 years of practice and development, and I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
Would you briefly maybe describe what you're seeing when you're tuning in to what I call the mind eye? Is it colors?
It
Is it the
it
world
it
as
it
we're
shows itself. Well, it shows itself all different ways at whatever that moment or time is. It could be very visual, where I could see something very visually in someone's system. Where I might see a tear or a break or some sort of even sort of webbing structure of something sitting in there that I'll then sort of tune into and ask, what is this? Is this? And then I might get a feeling in my body of anger or sadness, or there might be some sort of reaction within me. And that's just by asking the question. It's by through my curiosity of what is this? It might just be a knowing. It's like, okay, I know, well, okay, something is on, or it just might be that I'm open where a question comes out. How's your relationship with your sister? Where
Mm.
just something comes out that there's something there with it just becomes it's almost like the bubble of consciousness of Daniel disappears enough for a pure question of the divine to come out, this pure essence of the divine to say, sister. Um,
Nice?
and
So it's all kind of
um,
information translated through different sensing.
it's all different sensing. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Do you
And
hear the divine speaking
and
to you, or
and
yeah?
yep, and I'll hear it too. Absolutely. It'll come as an essence of sound or harmonic.
Mm.
Um, um, and I think one of the things that vortex healing does really well is it takes your innate ability to sense, your innate senses, whether that's taste or sound or smell or whatever that it is, and bridges that, from that heart connection, from that divine bridge through vortex, however it develops through your system, it will create a foundation of where you're sensing from. So my interpretation of sensing, um, without all of that work, will then have to sort of filter in through my old reactions, filter in through my old beliefs and attitudes and all this sort of stuff of what I've believed to be the accumulation that is me right today. But one of the things that Vortex does extremely powerfully is create this new foundation where you still have your innate sensing um, abilities, apparatus, antennas, except the foundation of that interpretation changes or develops into something that is more present and not as a result of the accumulation of you and your beliefs and attitudes.
Cool. That sounds pretty cool
It
to
is
be able
it
to
is
see
really
and
cool.
feel the
It is-
world in a
yeah.
yeah.
And the deeper students go into the path of vortex healing in terms of um, um, strengthening their energy system, surrender through their consciousness into presence, into deeper awakening and so on and so forth, then deeper sensing transmissions come in to deepen that foundation of how we sense, how we interpret, of where we interpret that sensing from, sort of the foundation, and even then training the system how to be either passive in sensing, how to pick up on stuff, but then also how to look, to look into a system and say, right, this is what's going on. Having said that, just, not everybody has the same sensing ability. So at some point, or for some folks, it'll be very, very visual, very clear, very obvious. For others, it'll just be like, I don't know what you're talking about. I can't sense anything. Um, Often though, when I'm chatting with somebody, I'll find a way to show them actually that they are sensing at least something. And that typically, very often, sometimes there's cases where people just are not built to sense
Mm.
in the way that we're talking about. But, 9 point whatever times out of 10, you'll be able to show somebody that actually they are,
Sensing
there's just
something.
something in their own belief that is believes that it's not sensing.
Yeah,
Really cool
that's
stuff.
yeah, 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 and that really relates to my background in hypnosis, where a lot of people I meet and clients come to me at first and say, "Nobody can hypnotize me. I can't get hypnotized," and I'm like, "Okay, cool," and let's see where this belief comes from, because you're hypnotized by the belief that you can be hypnotized, and
Very
I would
good.
say maybe with sensing is kind of the same. There is
Yeah.
this belief that you cannot,
Yeah.
but if there is sensation, whatever that is, even a numbness, which I have experience with the heart and stuff like that, it is a
Mhm.
sensation of it can
Right.
be really scary, it can be really
Yeah.
uh, it can be hiding a lot of pain,
Yeah.
but there is something
Yeah. Yeah.
that I
Really
wouldn't be
nice.
able to explain, but you did a really good job. So thank you very much. Yeah, I think we'll leave it there today, because that's a lot for people to listen to and to just integrate maybe.
Mm.
And probably the plan is next time we'll speak
Mhm.
about karma and maybe the core veil.
Yeah, sure.
That's and go a little bit more and speak a little bit more about Merlin. We did speak about Merlin in the introductory episode.
Okay.
But I would love to demystify maybe the word divinity and Merlin in order to just make it more available to the most skeptical mind that might be listening to us, that got
Mm.
lost on the internet and are listening.
Very good. Very
Would
good.
you have a last word for us today? Maybe
No,
regarding the sensing
just
and for the vortex healing student, if you but I think you said so asking question would be the way to develop their sensing and to gently
yeah.
expand their gifts.
Yeah, I guess one way to look at it is that you could ask the question and don't wait for the answer. And that just sort of keeps you in this place of being open. So it's an interesting sort of little technique that you could use for yourself is ask the question and don't wait for the answer to come back. And just keep
Mm.
going on about your life and see what happens.
Cool, cool,
Yeah.
beautiful. Well, thank you very much for your time. That was a
Thank you.
fascinating. Even for me, I'm gonna have to integrate that conversation.
Great. Thanks, Lou. Much
And
appreciated. Great
my
fun.
pleasure. I'll see you soon.
See you next time.